Last year, I rented this vehicle from Hertz, and I was pretty impressed. But there was one big question that I didn't get to test in that first review. And that question is the Silverado a good choice for a long distance rental? Let's find out. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm a wildlife ecology professor helping you to build the wild kitchen. So what does an EV have to do with the wild kitchen? Well, I'm going to get to that in a future video, but I'm working on this concept of a food utility vehicle because I'm essentially searching for any that is going to meet the needs of someone who has a lot of food adventures both locally and away from home. So the Silverado EV has class-leading range. It's really spectacular, and there's not a lot of other vehicles on the market that can match it. Now, the question of whether or not you want to buy a Silverado EV is a different question and something that I'm not going to cover in this video, primarily because for an EV that I would want to own, the Silverado doesn't quite fit what I'm looking for. But if you need to rent a utility vehicle, like a truck, and you don't want to go with a gas-powered vehicle, is the Silverado a viable option for you? Now, in a previous video, I tested the Silverado as just a basic 2-day, 200-mile round-trip vehicle, and it held up pretty well. But for this test, I wanted to take the EV from Maryland to North Carolina for a hog slaughter, and you can check out that episode on this channel too. The last time I rented a Silverado EV, I didn't get to test how it charged, whether or not it could haul a large amount and travel over 500 miles. But that's what this video is about. So come with me and my dad as I walk you through the rental process for a Silverado EV, what it's like to charge this vehicle, which is something that a lot of you all commented on my first Silverado video. And I'll end with talking about my overall experience as probably the first test of hopefully will be several food utility vehicles channel. Let's get going. All right, so we're back again with the Silverado EV, and this time going on a little road trip. Gonna go all the way from Maryland to North Carolina for a pig butchery event. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a whole separate episode. But today, for this episode, I want to review this vehicle as a long-term road trip vehicle. Something that you might think about taking for a long-haul trip where you're going to have some things that you need to put in the back, maybe put in the trunk, and we're going to see how this does on the road. Hey folks, I just wanted to take a break and let you know that one of the best ways to get the most out of the content on this channel is to subscribe to my newsletter. Every Sunday, I give you more depth and insight into the topics I cover on Out There JCH, including thoughts and perspectives that I don't really share on this platform. The newsletter is free to sign up, and as an incentive to becoming a subscriber, I'm offering a free wild food resource guide that will help make you a more capable harvester and home cook. Just click the link in the description to sign up. Okay, let's get back to the episode. So let's review the plan for this trip. I flew from my home in Michigan to Maryland, where my parents live, to pick up my dad so we could go down to central North Carolina for this hog slaughter event. And because we were going to be transporting a pig in coolers, I wanted to rent a vehicle like a truck so that we didn't have to store meat inside the cab of a car where we would probably be cranking the heating and thus warming up the meat. Now, my other experience with the Silverado EV was renting it from Hertz, but renting a vehicle for a 4-night trip that ended up being almost 1,000 miles, which is simply not going to be practical with Hertz. For one, they didn't have this truck available at the BWI airport, and two, the cost per day was astronomical. So instead of going with Hertz to rent this vehicle, I decided to check out the Airbnb of rental cars, Turo. Now, Turo is not sponsoring this video. I'm just talking about my personal experience, spending my own money, and letting you know what that experience was like. So the cost on Turo was much more affordable, and it just so happens that there was a Silverado EV available in the Baltimore, Washington area. Now, I briefly considered renting an F-150 from Michigan and driving it all the way to Maryland and then North Carolina, but I had concerns about the lack of range, especially driving this vehicle in December where it was going to be cold. I was looking for an that I would be able to drive from Maryland down to North Carolina on a single charge. which ended up being about 330 miles, and the F-150 just couldn't get there. Now, I'll talk about the charging network later on in this video, but suffice it to say, I could have rented an F-150 and been just fine. But the rental experience in Turo is very similar to the rental experience in an Airbnb. You book the vehicle, you pay a deposit to ensure that if something were to happen, that the owner of the vehicle can be compensated, and pick up the keys from the owner and get going. It's really simple and straightforward. Now, of course, just like with Airbnb, you have to be careful about who you're renting from and where you're going to be meeting up. So it's important to always use common sense, and if something doesn't quite feel right, then it's best to just move on. My rental experience with the owner was great. They were kind, punctual, communicative, and I'd probably rent from Turo again, especially given the cost difference between them and Hertz or any rental company.
Okay, so like one of the things that I really like about this vehicle is its size, right? And it's bigger than most trucks. As you can see, right, we're talking about a huge, absolutely massive vehicle, quad cab, lots of space in the back, really nice. But like for trips like this, where you're going to be doing some filming or doing like some other outdoor sort of rugged activities, you just look at the space in here and you can see that I've got a bunch of my recording equipment sitting here, got a water bottle there, another water bottle there, sunglasses, and there's just a ton of space. You know, got my equipment and backpack back there. Thanks to Peak Design for sponsoring this video. Just kidding, they're not sponsoring this video yet, but this could be us, Peak Design. Yeah, so Apple CarPlay kicked in. Wireless CarPlay kicked in, so I had to stop. The video stopped, but this is familiar from the last trip. Huge cabin, lots of space. It's the work truck version. It's not the consumer truck. So everything here is hard touch plastic. I love the fact that it's just utilitarian, right? It's got everything that you need. A few things that you wish it had, like heated seats. It is cold out here, but the heater kicks in pretty good. I'm glad to be back in this vehicle. Glad that I rented it from Hertz a couple of weeks ago because I'm more familiar with it, so I feel better going on a road trip with it. This is where we're going to be for the next couple of days. I'm glad we have this truck. This is really dope.
Yeah. So what are your first impressions? Look at that, I got the 360 camera.
It's a beaut.
Yeah. This is the
comfortable ride.
Yeah. This is the work truck version. So this one doesn't have like all the creature comforts, right? Like all of this is hard touch plastic and everything. There's no heated seats, you know, it's a utilitarian truck. What's interesting though is that the telescoping steering wheel is motorized, but your seats aren't motorized. Like what?
And you don't have a memory that you can
Nope.
just push a button and it'll come in as soon as you get in the car.
Nope. So we're at 79% charge, and it says that we've got 358 miles.
Okay.
So if that were in fact the case, which, you know, we're not going to get 358 miles, but if it were, then we'd be able to get all the way to North Carolina on just this one charge. So we've got 168 miles, 170 miles to Richmond. It'll be interesting to see how many miles we have by the time we get to Richmond. It's cold outside, so that's gonna, you know, depreciate the efficiency of the battery, and we've got the heat on as well, so, you know, we'll see. You want to guess what the mileage will be when we get to Richmond?
Yes.
140? Okay. Okay. That'll be interesting to see. Okay, so made it to Richmond about halfway through our journey, and just a couple of stats. So we're at a Electrify America charger. This is the 350 kilowatt charger right by a Walmart, so charging super fast. Been plugged in for 10 minutes and we are about 10% away from being at 80%. So we left with 150 miles of range, and our trip here was 151 miles or 160 miles. So we made that with about 197 miles of range left. So really pleased to mention that the readings on the Silverado were spot on. And so we got here with maybe like 4 or 5 extra miles of range used up by the car. And, you know, if you're within 5 miles of your range that you're getting a readout on your vehicle, that's fantastic. So didn't actually need to charge this vehicle in order to get all the way down to North Carolina, but decided to come here, take advantage of the supercharger, and get everything kind of up to 80%, which is a good level. I'm amazed at how
well this truck is doing in terms of efficiency. And you could probably chalk up the extra couple of miles of range to the fact that we had the AC on and we were averaging about 70 miles an hour coming down here. So just the efficiency of this vehicle is astounding, really. It is a perfect road tripping vehicle. I'm really amazed. The charging process was real easy. I had signed up for the Electrify America app before I came down here. I couldn't quite get it to work here, but they have an option to check out as a guest. And really you just put your card in like you would at a gas station and, you know, charge and go. And it's real simple. So the infrastructure here for the Electrify America is really dope. And this is no different than stopping at a gas station. It does take longer, but the fact that I'm not using any petrochemicals for this trip is really awesome. There are, let's say, maybe about 8 chargers here. And so you can see it's full. So I might have had to wait, but that's not actually the case. And so this is just really awesome. I can't say enough about this experience. It's just been fantastic. Almost fully charged at 72%. Right now, that's costing me about $40. So I'll probably end up with a top off price of probably short of $50, I would imagine. When you compare that to a truck, having to fill up that tank with diesel or gasoline, it's a lot cheaper. And this is the middle of the day, so peak hours of electricity. If I were charging this at home, it'd be a lot cheaper. So anyway, I just think this is like a great experience so far, hanging out with my dad in the car. So I know we're not at the end of this journey. We're really just beginning. We haven't even gotten to our destination. But I can say without a doubt that this has been so far just a fantastic experience. And I won't have to charge this vehicle again until we come back through a couple of days later. The ride's been great. Climate control's been great. No issues. Cruise control's working fine. It's just a little bit more time that you have to wait to fill up. But I didn't even have to. I could have driven all the way on a single charge. I think if you have access to a DC fast charger like this one, then this experience is just fantastic. Can't recommend it enough so far. It's going to take a lot to go wrong for me to not really kind of think about this more seriously. It's a real practical alternative to gasoline vehicles. It's pretty good.
Okay, so we're here, and I'll give you some final stats. So, and when we left, we had 373 miles of range on the vehicle. So that should have left us, if the range that was indicated was the exact range that we had, 373 minus 181, we should have gotten here with 192 miles of range, but instead we got here with 149 miles of range. We'll call that 150 or maybe even 152 just so we have round numbers, because I did miss the turn, so we had to like turn back around. So let's do 192 minus 152. So we had an extra 40 miles of range that went unaccounted for based on the calculations from the vehicle. And so I attribute that extra 40 miles of range that we burned through on our journey down here to the speed that we were going, because, you know, we were going pretty fast, probably averaged 72 miles an hour, whereas for our first leg of our journey, we probably averaged like 68, 65 miles an hour. I have to look at like the times to see exactly, you know, to average that out. But it definitely felt like we were driving faster the second leg. The climate control was still on, but that wasn't different from the first leg. So really the only thing that changed was the speed that we were going on the second leg. And so, you know, that gives you kind of a sense of, you know, what the difference is going to be based on your speed. Like if you're going to be averaging above 70 miles an hour, then you're going to burn through that mileage a little bit more quickly. If we had driven down here at 60 miles an hour or 65 miles an hour, we probably would not have had that mismatch in terms of range. All that being said, we're still here with 150 miles of range on this vehicle. And had we been at 100%, we wouldn't have had to charge the vehicle at all. So, you know, the idea that you can drive this vehicle with all of the capability that it has is wild to me. And, you know, the cost to fill this car up is not nothing. It's still $50. You know, that's a lot, but you get a lot of capability. But the reason why you buy an EV is not strictly because you're going to be saving a ton of money on gas. You're going to save some money on gas, but you're not going to be saving, you know, hundreds of dollars a month on it, unless you have like a home solar system, an electrical system, or battery system that you can charge the vehicle, which does cost money. If you were dependent upon like third-party chargers for this vehicle still makes a ton of sense as something that you do long distance trips for. If you got a vehicle that's only got a 280 miles of range, and really that's probably only about 240, this is going to take a longer time for you to get down here. But even with that, like, charging to 100% probably take you an hour, and you'd only have to stop once. So it would add an hour to the trip, probably, or half an hour to the trip. I still think this vehicle is absolutely fantastic, worth it. Really enjoying it. So we're going to get to the hotel, get packed up, and get going. If you haven't watched the episode on the hog slaughter that I participated in on this trip, then you're going to want to go back and watch that footage. Part 2 should be coming out shortly after this video is posted, but part 1 is really fascinating, where I'm down in North Carolina learning hog butchery with a group of black families that have been doing this sort of thing since emancipation. That's the head person there, Mr. Johnny, distributing parts of the pig that we worked on the previous day. So it's a really great episode you should check out.
Yeah, do me a favor. Yeah. Open the door and hit the unlock button for me. What is that? Patrick.
Yeah.
You keep on. I said, that's a brand new truck. Why is it? Two damn trucks. Where's the motor at?
It's by each wheel.
Oh, it's got a motor on each wheel.
It's got a motor on each wheel. Yeah. I rented this. I don't own this, so I just rented it to come down.
So now, how long did it come down on a full charge?
It could. I got it with 80%, and we got about 350 miles out of 80%. So we're gonna stop and get it fully charged and see how far we can get. But it's
where's the charging station or close by?
Yeah, this is not bad. I don't like, day to day. I don't really need a truck, but I like the electrical truck. It's nice.
Okay, so we are good to go. Yeah, I appreciate the backup camera and everything, but I do wish that there's a button you could press to switch over so you can get out of that when you're all done. So we've got 372 miles of charge in the vehicle. That stop took us about 40 minutes to get charged up on our way just before 1 o'clock. So if we were going to drive straight through and not stop, then it's about a 5-hour drive. And then hopefully we can do it in 6 hours or maybe 6.5 hours. But we probably have 400 pounds more weight with the pig, the ice, and the coolers. Maybe 350. So I'm curious to see what that does to our mileage. So we've got 163 miles. So if this is reading true, we should be in Richmond with about 200 miles left of charge. The bed is completely full, or almost, not completely full, but almost full. There's still some room in there. We've got sort of carry-on size luggage in the back seat with plenty of room, and then bigger luggage in the front seat, or in the front. So
It's full, bro.
yeah, but that's really dope. A lot of people talk about how they don't like, with EVs, they don't like stopping. And I think, if you're going on a road trip, depending on how far you go, if you only have to stop once to charge, and you can do it relatively quickly, half an hour, 45 minutes or so, I don't really mind, personally, the fact that, we stop. It's nice to kind of take a break and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also like the idea of not being dependent upon gasoline, and just, the environmental impact of harvest petrochemicals from the ground, and keep all of those things, all of that infrastructure going, and the pollution and global climate change contributions, which are not zero for an electric vehicle, are not as detrimental. Yeah, I am a fan. Okay, so probably one of the biggest takeaways that I have from this experience is how overblown my charging anxiety was. Now, this is one of the number one comments that I got on the first video. Concerns about being able to charge a non-Tesla vehicle on a long-term trip, and how people were worried about running out of charge. So there's two things that kind of get around this. And one, which is something that I knew before I rented this vehicle a second time, was the fact that the range for the Silverado EV is just spectacular. You really don't have to worry about running out of charge at the standard distances for most of the other EVs that are on the road. What I found for the EV on this journey was that I had reliably just under 400 miles on a single charge. Now, that was enough for me to get from North Carolina back to Maryland on a single charge, but we ended up stopping in order to not run the charge all the way down and potentially be stuck in between places. But this is no different than driving a gas-powered vehicle and being concerned and having to plan a little bit ahead to make sure that you don't run out of fuel. So, renting the Silverado EV alone, I think, eliminates a lot of the charging anxiety that you might feel. Now, the bigger concern that I had was that the Silverado does not plug into the extensive Tesla supercharger network across the country. You're talking about a much less, or at least I thought, much less reliable Electrify America network. But that's where I was just flat out wrong. The Electrify America network, at least in areas around big cities, east of the Appalachians, is actually comparable to the Tesla charging network. Now, an individual station is not going to have as many chargers as you'll find at many of the Tesla superchargers, but there's adequate charging at those places, and there was only one instance where I had to wait, and only for about 15 minutes, for a charger to be open. The other awesome thing that I found is that the charging experience at these Electrify America stations was almost as smooth as I've experienced when I've rented a Tesla vehicle, which I don't plan to rent Teslas anymore because of their CEO. But it was really easy. And as you saw in this video, you simply pull up, pay, plug in your vehicle, and that's it. And I was surprised that there were lots of ultra fast chargers available along the journey, which were able to charge my vehicle at speeds that exceed a Tesla supercharger. Now, it took about the same time as when I rented a Model Y a number of years ago to get from 20% to 80%, but that's because the Silverado EV just has a massive battery or set of batteries in it. So having to stop for 25, 30 minutes to charge my vehicle up to the level that I wanted is really no different than the experience that you get with a Tesla, and not that much different from filling up a vehicle at a gas station. And yes, it does take longer, but I think, as I've mentioned before in other videos, I like the ability to take a break, decompress, just sort of like relax, stretch my legs. That comes with a longer stop. It's kind of pleasant to take that amount of time. In this country, we're taught, rush, rush, go, go, time is money, all this stuff. But I think it's really pleasant to be able to stop and enjoy the journey and think about how that process is going, especially in a long-range vehicle like the Silverado, where you really only have to stop once on a leg of the journey. So in terms of charging anxiety, as long as your journey is within 150 to 200 miles of a major city, you don't really have to worry about running out of charge. Now, if you are driving up terrain, if you're carrying a heavy load, and if you're draining the battery because you're cranking the air conditioning or the heating, that's definitely going to take away from the range of your battery. But again, most electric vehicles that are out there can get you 120, 150 miles, 200 miles on a single charge, regardless of the conditions that you're driving in, with the exception of really extreme conditions. So I found that this experience with charging the Silverado EV to be as seamless as using an electric vehicle in a country where the charging infrastructure just can't match the gasoline infrastructure. I found it to be really excellent and not a drawback whatsoever. Now, the second takeaway I want to share is that renting from a traditional rental car company is just not cost effective. They charge too much per day, and the availability of these vehicles is not great. So if you're thinking about renting a large for more than just a few days, I would look at outlets like Turo rather than outlets like Hertz. You're going to save a lot of money in the same way that you save money staying at an Airbnb versus a hotel chain. But keep in mind that just like with Airbnb, with Turo, because you're renting from an individual, you're going to pay more upfront to cover the liability that is baked into the cost for some of these other larger rental car companies. So I ended up having to put down almost twice the amount of money that this rental vehicle cost me up front, but I got that money back within 36 hours of my rental ending. So you're going to save money in the long run, but you're going to maybe have to pony up a little bit more money up front. Speaking of money, the rental of this vehicle cost me about $750 and fuel cost me about $200. Now, I filled up the Silverado EV probably 2 more times than I absolutely needed to, which would have saved me about half the cost in fuel cost. But because I wanted to experience the charging and to make sure that I returned the vehicle with a full charge, I ended up charging it probably more than I needed to. So the cost difference between using the gas for that vehicle and charging the batteries is not really that different. And as a friend has told me, that EVs really make sense to own if you can charge it at home, where you can take advantage of the different rates that you'll get for using electricity, because charging the vehicle during the day is going to cost you more than charging the vehicle at night when electricity rates are a lot lower. So as a repeat rental vehicle, the Silverado EV doesn't really make much sense. But for somebody like me, I would only rent this vehicle if I needed to use the truck to carry a large heavy load. So you're not necessarily saving a whole lot of money by renting an EV, but you are taking a step back from the petrochemical infrastructure that causes a wide variety of environmental issues. So the satisfaction of being able to drive a vehicle that you know is not putting out lots of fossil fuels into the atmosphere just by using it is something that's really satisfying. The other thing is that these vehicles are just cool. The ability to accelerate very quickly, the technology that's in these vehicles is just kind of neat to operate. They're a lot quieter than gas-powered vehicles. And there's a certain sense of satisfaction that you're not using gasoline. You're not dependent on this highly polluting infrastructure. That is something that hopefully more of us are able to move away from. And as more people take advantage of electric vehicles, and as the industry allows consumers to do, hopefully this will bring the cost down so that more people can take advantage of this amazing technology that can do just about everything that a gas-powered vehicle can do. So overall, I'm very, very pleased with this experience. I didn't do this solely because I thought I was going to save a lot of money, and in fact, I didn't really save all that much money. But the fact that I was able to use an electric vehicle for a job, an electric truck for a job that it was designed to do without having to use fossil fuel is just really excellent. Now, I don't plan to buy a Silverado EV for my next vehicle, even though I plan for my next vehicle to be an EV. And the reason for this is that the Silverado EV is just massive. And despite my ambitions of establishing a fully functional and self-sufficient homestead here in Michigan, I'm not quite there yet. And I'm hoping that if we find ourselves needing a truck and buying an EV truck, we'll be able to get some of these features that are in the Silverado in a smaller package. But if you need a truck to rent for a job that's going to take multiple days, and you're able to afford the upfront cost of renting from a place like Turo, I think renting the Silverado EV is a really excellent choice. The vehicle performs beautifully. It does everything that a gas-powered truck can do within this context, and they're just fun to drive. So consider the Silverado EV for your next long-distance rental job. I'm not done talking about EV trucks, and in fact, in my next video on this topic, I plan to do a direct comparison between my experience with the Silverado EV down to North Carolina with transporting the other half of my 400-pound pig in a gas-powered truck from Maryland back to Michigan. So stay tuned for that. And if you haven't checked out my review of the Silverado EV from Hertz, and you're interested in whether or not this is a viable option for you, check out this video. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on